it's the beginning of the biggest innovation.
What do you think distributors and clients really want when it comes to working with private markets firms and what fits well in their portfolio?
Well, first of all, our license to operate is performance. That's kind of the table stake. And then they want also convenience. Performance is one piece, but also making sure they got their various statements, to the right time, delivered in the right way. We need to adopt that mindset in our industry to make things convenient for the end investor.
Peter A., what do you think the U.S. wealth market wants?
Well, I think if the recent year or 2 years is any indication, Evergreen is the future. And if you look at it, when we talk to our distribution partners, what they're telling us is for the first time, the amount of capital that they're raising in evergreens has surpassed the amount of capital that they're raising in drawdown structure products. But on the evergreens, because that capital is now flowing to evergreens, because to Peter's point, it's ease of use. That's where they'd rather be. They'd rather have some type of liquidity window. It's easier to allocate. There's no J curve. They're compounding their returns every day as opposed to only getting returns on their invested money, not their committed capital.
Evergreens itself has a nuance to it. Not every evergreen structure is the same. Different firms have to create different types of evergreen structures based on the type of platform they have. Peter A., I want to stick with you on the start of this question, which is, why did you decide to create the evergreen structure that you have for the U.S. market?
One of the things I said to Peter is, what's the structure going to be? And when he told me it was an opco structure, I was very happy, because one of the things that's also really important is, where are you going to raise the money, at least in the U.S., right? And the opco model really is set up to be able to invest with the accredited investor. So it goes below qualified purchaser. The other thing that I would mention that's really, really important is that one of the concerns that we hear from advisors is that if we're going to have multiple private markets players, whether it's in private equity or infrastructure or even real estate, is that we don't want to have overlapping investment strategies across the multiple managers that we work with. Well, we're a control investor. And so that means we basically own the company outright. And so it's highly unlikely that any investment that we own in our opco structures is also going to be owned in one of our competitors' firms. So that's definitely a benefit to you if you're an investor in one of our evergreen structures.
I think that's a great segue. Peter B., why create the opco structure, and what about that? It's an innovative structure for the space. What about that jumped out to you as being the right structure to use for an evergreen?
I think Peter touched on it already, is that you want to make sure, go back to convenience, that if you're a distributor and you service both qualified purchasers and accredited investors, if you come with a product that go across both, so you make it convenient for the distributor, the advisor, to look at the client book and say, well, it fits everyone, right? So it's back to that word convenience. It's actually as simple as that.
I want to make sure that the Wealth Channel understands the nuances of this space. What would each of you say is your biggest worry, concern about the Wealth Channel starting to adopt private markets?
One is, if memory serves, there's about 14,000 registered PE firms in the US, right? I would say when we talk opco structures and running an evergreen, there is probably 20 of those 14,000 that have the license to operate with the right platform, operational platform, sourcing capabilities and so forth to do really well for the end client. So my concern is that the rest of the pack is launching products that are really not suitable. So there will be some not great products, and we'll see that in the market, and that's not great for the whole industry. That's my biggest concern.
For me, I would say, the evergreen structures are really gaining significant momentum, as we talked about earlier. My biggest concern, Michael, is that investors need to understand that this is not a liquidity vehicle, that they need to hold it for 3 to 5 years. So the point I'm getting at is the way you sell them is very, very important.
On that point, what do each of you think is still missing from the education of private markets for the Wealth Channel?
I really still think it's education of the broad set of advisors that really haven't adopted yet. So I guess it's adaptation and knowledge about the product, making sure it's sold in the right way, and the nuts and the bolts of these products, the long-term nature is really well understood.
The other angle that I'd like to cover on the Evergreen side is, yes, I know you both work with the wealth channel, but it's interesting to think about whether or not institutions will start to adopt the use of Evergreen structures. I think there's two interesting points there. One is, will they start to adopt it? And if so, why?
Yes. And I would say, just like I say that the private wealth markets are not one-dimensional, neither is the institutional world. And so what I would say, to be more specific to your question, is I think we're seeing that more in the small to medium-sized institutional market. And the reason for that is those folks don't have large investment teams. So what we're seeing is, if they can invest in an evergreen structure that's run by the same team, that's run by the same firm, that's run in the same manner effectively as the drawdowns, that's a much easier, to our point earlier, even about private wealth, it's ease of use for the institutional markets as well. So we absolutely see that coming.
And then you think about this from building the wealth business perspective. EQT has over 1,000 LP clients, institutional side. How do you think about harmonizing the work you're doing with your institutional colleagues as you think about how the institutional LPs might think about both drawdown funds as well as evergreens?
It's actually not that difficult, Michael, in the sense that you just need to make sure that you think about it in the right way, that private wealth is a segment, is a client segment. Evergreen solutions is a product set. Right? So if you keep that in mind, we are covering and making our evergreen solutions and private markets in general available for the private wealth segment. But the evergreen solutions, as Peter said as well, is suitable for many more than just the private wealth segment.
In your mind, are evergreens the biggest innovation in private markets in recent time?
It's the beginning of the biggest innovation. We still, because it's still evolving. But the concept of not having to lock yourself up for 10 to 12 years and no J-curve, absolutely.
This was such a great window into how you're thinking about building the wealth business and how you're building it and thinking differently about it. So thank you, Peter A., Peter B.
Thank you.
This was great.
Pleasure. Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Likewise.